The law requires that every single person who is going to be deported gets a hearing first.
Well,
do you acknowledge that?
I'll have to ask the lawyers about that. All I can say is this. If you're going to have 21 million people, and if we have to get a lot of them out because they're criminals, we're going to have to act fast. We can't. Do you think we can give 21 million trials? Let's say each trial takes 2 weeks. Is that what you want us to do?
President Donald Trump questioned the right to due process back in April. That was the video that you just viewed. And the reason why I'm showing that to you now is because suddenly key sections of the US Constitution have been deleted from the government's website. Now, which key parts am I talking about here? Let's take a look. So there are changes in Article 1 of the US Constitution with large parts of Section 8 removed. So let's put up this graphic which shows you what I'm talking about. This was put together by TechCrunch, and the highlighted portion is the portion that was deleted from the government website. So sections 9 and 10 have also been deleted altogether from the government website. Now, what do those portions of our Constitution indicate? What kind of rights are we talking about? Well, as you can see, the archived version of the site on the Wayback Machine on the left and the current site on the right shows that text highlighted in yellow has been removed. So as TechCrunch notes, some of the section's text appears missing as indicated by a trailing semicolon at the end of Section 8, where text used to follow. Now, these sections are very relevant, okay, because they largely relate to the powers that Congress has and does not have, as well as limitations on the powers of individual states. The removal includes sections relating to habeas corpus, the powers that protect citizens from unlawful detention. Habeas corpus is one of the most important constitutional rights that Americans enjoy. It allows us to question the government if we feel that we are wrongfully detained. Without habeas corpus, you have a government so powerful that they can accuse Americans of anything, detain them for any reason, with no evidence, no due process, no justice at all, and essentially allow that person or people to remain detained without a day in court, without the ability to challenge their detention or demand some answers in regard to what they're being detained for. Don't believe me? Well, there have been some instances in recent American history in which a former Republican president suspended habeas corpus. And I'm gonna give you the example in just a minute, but first some more details here. Now look, while changing the US Constitution's text on a website doesn't magically erase our constitutional rights, this should still be very concerning, considering that, well, first of all, Stephen Miller had previously threatened to suspend habeas corpus. In fact, he did so earlier this year. Let's take a look at that.
Well, the Constitution is clear, and that, of course, is the supreme law of the land, that the privilege of the writ of habeas corpus can be suspended in a time of invasion. So I would say that's an option we're actively looking at.
Okay, well, the US is not under an invasion, as the Trump administration has been bragging about. He has effectively closed the border. There are no more people trying to come in, claim asylum at the border. So what invasion would they cite in an effort to claim that it is just for the president of the United States to unilaterally suspend habeas corpus? Again, habeas corpus is such an important constitutional right. It wasn't an amendment to the Constitution. Habeas corpus was included in the original body of the United States Constitution. It is one of the most important constitutional rights that the American people have. Why was that deleted from the official government website under the Trump administration, which on multiple occasions has questioned things like due process, our right to due process? It also doesn't help that our Department of Homeland Security Secretary, also known as Border Patrol Barbie, demonstrated that she doesn't even know what habeas corpus is. Take a look.
So Secretary Noem, what is habeas corpus? Well, habeas corpus is a constitutional right that the president has to be able to remove people from this country and suspend their right
let me stop you, ma'am. Habeas corpus, excuse me, that's incorrect.
President Lincoln used it.
Excuse me. Habeas corpus is the legal principle that requires that the government provide a public reason for detaining and imprisoning people.
Maybe a little less time with the cosplay, a little more time, I don't know, reading our Constitution. You're serving in the United States government, in the federal government, and you don't know what habeas corpus is? You don't know what habeas corpus is. God, it's just this administration. But I mean, why would she know what habeas corpus is? Does she even care about the rights that American citizens enjoy thanks to our Constitution? Does she care? Of course she doesn't care. She's too busy, irresponsibly pointing the barrel of a gun at Border Patrol agents for a photo op. Embarrassing. In fact, our founding fathers again believed that the right to due process, the writ of habeas corpus, was so important that it was, again, in the original body of our Constitution, not an amendment. And to be honest, in recent history, this country had a stain on its record as a result of the Bush administration, which denied habeas corpus to detainees who were imprisoned over at Guantanamo Bay. So they were held indefinitely with no charges. So imagine the government, and I'm trying to reason with, some of the Republican voters who might be watching right now, who have been fearful of a government that grows too large. Some of the libertarians who might be watching, who are definitely fearful of the government growing too large. This is a prime example of the government having too much power being concentrated specifically in the executive branch. Essentially allowing for the federal government, the administration, to accuse anyone of anything, detain them with no charges indefinitely, and then strip them of the right to challenge their detention. That is what the Bush administration did. And that case went all the way to the Supreme Court. So what happened exactly? Well, as I mentioned, it was the detainees who were being held at Guantanamo Bay. Since they were denied habeas corpus, they were unable at the time to challenge their detention, but there were even American citizens. Let me just be clear about that, because I think that's an important thing to clarify here. There were even American citizens detained at Guantanamo Bay. They hadn't been charged, they were being held indefinitely. The Bush administration just accused them of being enemy combatants. But they weren't even able to challenge that accusation at all, in any way, shape, or form. That's what happens when habeas corpus is suspended. And that's what happened here. So here's an example from attorney and author John W. Whitehead, who has practiced in areas of constitutional law and human rights. He details what happened in this case, which made its way to the Supreme Court. Take a look.
We have two American citizens, Mohammed Munaf and Shaki Omar, who were captured in the Middle East, in Europe, and now they find themselves in a prison outside of Baghdad, run by American soldiers. But these are American citizens, and the people who are controlling them are American soldiers, although it's called a multinational base. The Bush administration is saying these people have no rights at all. They can be subjected to a military commission where they can't put on the kind of defense that you would in a civilian court. And that's what you usually do with prisoners of war and people who really are foreigners, if we want to put it in that vernacular. But these are American citizens, and that's the crucial issue here. Incredibly, the Bush administration, the President of the United States, has said that American citizens that are abroad need to take what they get in terms of torture and abuse if they're basically stupid enough to be in a foreign country. Well, that goes against everything that our Constitution stands for.
That does go against everything our Constitution stands for. And if the Trump administration is weighing the possibility of suspending habeas corpus, that's government tyranny, essentially. It is. That allows for the federal government to accuse anyone of anything, detain them indefinitely, even with no charges, and strips that detainee of the right to challenge their detention. Doesn't get more authoritarian than that. And so the Bush administration was challenged on this, and the Supreme Court weighed in on a case that was known as Boumediene v. Bush. Oral arguments for that case began in December of 2007, and the court, luckily, ruled 5-4 that the administration's actions were unconstitutional. Now, the ruling challenged the government's assertion of unchecked executive power, emphasizing that such authority cannot override the fundamental protections guaranteed by our Constitution. Now, there are cases in which, theoretically, the writ of habeas corpus could be suspended. Now, can the President of the United States do it unilaterally? No. Congress would need to act. And so during a national crisis or emergency, habeas corpus can be suspended through Congress. But again, the president cannot remove constitutional rights unilaterally. Which is what brings me back to what was deleted in terms of our Constitution, the text of our Constitution on the government website. Because as I mentioned earlier, they also deleted portions of the Constitution pertaining to the separation of power, our checks and balances, how much power Congress has. So if you, on the official government website, start deleting text pertaining to the power of Congress, and you know that Congress would need to vote in order to suspend habeas corpus, well, I mean, you're kind of giving the game away, aren't you? You know, seeing what's happening in the West Bank with all of these unarmed Palestinian civilians getting terrorized, run out of their own homes by terrorist Israeli settlers, it's made me actually appreciate our Second Amendment rights more. I know that some people are gonna be upset about that, but if you're armed, at least you have a fighting shot, fighting chance. And the argument that we typically hear from Second Amendment absolutists is that our ability to bear arms checks government power. It protects us from tyranny. But I would argue that here's a perfect example of a massive red flag that should get people to act before you even have to think about arming yourself or using violence. The federal government thought they could just erase this text, no one would notice, and they'd get away with it. And I think they're trying to get the ball rolling. Trump and that administration doesn't give a damn about what the left has to say. That's not his base. But he does seem to care what his base says, what they're upset about, what they're angry about. He reversed course just this week after the Department of Homeland Security put out a notice indicating that FEMA funds would be denied to any state or municipality that engaged in a boycott of Israel or Israeli-based companies. There was so much fury among a portion of the MAGA base that they quietly reversed course on that, which gave me a shred of hope. So if you do worry about our government becoming too powerful, becoming tyrannical to the point where American citizens can be arrested with no due process and with the suspension of habeas corpus, please say something. Please don't sit idly by and chalk this all up to, you have TDS. I don't have TDS. I hate both parties. I thought Biden was a terrible president. I love this country and I want to protect whatever freedom we have left. And this is unacceptable.
Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows.